So hello everybody, it's Stephen again. So yesterday I was talking about fluids mechanics having to do with this passage that I read in 1 John chapter 5, verse 8, and how it talks about a second Trinity of the Holy Spirit and the blood of Christ from the cross and the water of baptism, and how that got me thinking about laminar flow in fluids, and how the Holy Spirit seems to be a completely unchaotic laminar flow with these very special properties. You know, there's no divergence of the intention. The intention is pure, unchaotic, non-divergent Holy Spirit. And then how a blood, at least in us, the blood behaves very laminarly, but at the edges there's difficulties, and then as you get older, you get more and more of these little chaotic vortices that are forming in your blood, and so we eventually have problems with our health because of the lack of laminar flow. So we begin pretty good. But as we get older, we sort of lose our similarity to the Holy Spirit, you might say, in terms of its unchaoticness. And then the idea of the water, typically, with the way that we see it in nature, out in the wild, is quite chaotic, and through the millennia water has represented chaos and the non-intentional, right? We don't know what this will do next. So, yep. So I was thinking about that, and I've read like 3 other Bibles since then, and some of them are missing this passage. This John, they just kind of gloss over it, as if somebody read it and thought, "Huh, boy, that seems odd that there would be 2 trinities." So my inclination is, obviously, I was not the first one to have it, and the people that were compiling Bibles, the King James edition has it. And I suppose that comes from the Vulgate. I'm not sure, but the Vulgate, I would suppose, has it. But the Greek Bible does not have it. And the Peshitta, the Syrian Peshitta, which I have, is it's missing. So the entire 1 John is missing. Well, the Peshitta doesn't have any of the John's epistles, but even in the sort of at the end, the Peshitta says, well, here's some other things that are in Syriac, and 1 John is not one of them. So that's kind of surprising to me, because the Syriac tends to be sort of this embodied, and what's more embodied than blood, I suppose. Or what's more embodied than the Holy Spirit after baptism? If you're Christian, we think of that as a complete, an outer, perfect embodiment. So anyway, so then I started thinking about chaos theory, with these little chaotic vortices in our bloodstream, and and how the chaos creeps in. And chaos is something that doesn't exist in the quantum world. So we know our world is at root quantum from a scientific point of view, and we know that it becomes this timeline thermodynamic. I've talked about this endlessly. And one way you can show that is through chaos. We know that in our world that chaos can spontaneously exist. I think you can. It's called the butterfly effect. I think the idea that a butterfly is flapping its wings, that change in air pressure around its wings can lead to a Category 5 hurricane, by chaos introducing something that then grows and builds. And the chaos is a one way where science has been trying to figure out how the quantum. They've been looking for instances of quantum chaotic behavior, and they've gotten very sophisticated experiments to try and show a quantum chaotic behavior, but so far no go. The quantum world appears to be perfectly probabilistic, no little extra remainders, no math with a remainder going on in the quantum world. So that's interesting. So the quantum world is completely predictable. We know that because I've been talking about the equation that that says this is the most accurate equation we have in all of science that predicts how quantum behavior will proceed or recede. It proceeds and recedes with the same probabilities, which is partly why we have such a hard time comprehending what this thing is. It doesn't behave according to time, and we are so embedded in time, and our thought is so embedded in how time flies, how time runs, how time moves. But it's the chaos that's introducing a timeline. So a chaotic event happens, the butterfly flaps its wings, and it's a forward flap of the wings, and that little vortice turns into a hurricane, and that is a time event that happens through time, and it's non-reversible. It doesn't appear as though a Category 5 hurricane ever dissipates into a movement of a butterfly wing. And this is all taken very seriously in science. We're all like, oh, how does so that's an interesting thing, because I've been talking a lot about how God is in this non-timelined equivalent of the quantum, and how we exist in this created world that has timeline, that has in the case of today's video here, we're positing that it's the chaos that introduces the timeline. It's the chaotic event and how would the chaotic event happen? And you can even go back in science, thinking back to the formation of the universe, when I talked a little bit about how particles can form from the quantum background, but they form as particles and antiparticles, always in equal amounts, and they can collide and go back into the pure energy of a quantum state, and there's no remainder. So how in the world did our universe form? Because this science would say that we are pretty sure that the universe formed from a quantum event. So a quantum event happens, and there's no remainder. But this one of the big mysteries in science is after what we call the Big Bang, which I think it's a horrible name for what might have actually happened, but let's call it the Big Bang. That there's lots of matter and antimatter, and the matter and antimatter fuse, and there's supposed to be nothing left, but there's a little bit left. There's a little bit left, and what we live in is the little bit left, and there's ideas about what that little bit left is, but there's no idea of how, if what preceded it was a purely quantum state, as to how that happened. So there's no theory of why there's anything at all in the universe, any matter, because the universe proceeds from a quantum state, has perfect predictability, probability, and so no remainder, and so no matter, because the matter and antimatter are completely fused. But here we are. So we know that something happened that said, okay, well, we'll introduce a tiny little bit of chaos, and that little tiny bit of chaos in the initial quantum event that leads to the universe will lead to the matter that exists as we see in the universe. So you can think of that as a plausible theory. Well, it's not a theory, because we aren't positing what was the chaos and how could it have happened. But there you have it. So that little passage in 1 John has been quite profitable, and it doesn't end there, because so then I was thinking, well, I have a bit of a session with aromatics in my professional life. Aromatics play a large role. I ended up visiting an Orthodox church for the same time, because they took aromatics incense so seriously, and I was trying to find conversation partners on aromatics, and I found them in the Orthodox church. But in the Orthodox Church, we have a censer, right? We have this little device that hangs on a chain, and it's got 12 bells for the 12 apostles attached to it. So when you walk around with this little censer that's burning incense inside it, and the incense can escape through little holes on the top, that the priest is holding it by these chains that have the bells, and so it's, I think they call it smells and bells, right? I don't like that term at all. I'm a poet, so it's like that's like the most base term you could ever have for what's going on, but okay, that's what people call it. But the bells reminding you of the apostles, and as the priest goes around the room and shakes the censer, and the beautiful aromas come out from the incense, you also have these apostles in your midst. And that's off track a little bit, because what I really want to talk about was the incense. So. There's the idea in the church that that incense arises and goes up to God, and it sweetens your ideas, your prayers, your confessions. It sweetens your thought as it rises to God, and so God will pay more attention to your plea if you embed it in a nice aromatic. So we burn an incense. I think it goes all the way back to Noah building a place to burn have the burnt offerings. Have an altar that's purposely built for creating aromatics that might please God. Like that began with Noah as actually constructing an altar for that purpose with the intent. But anyway, so long time that mankind has been thinking we should offer sweet smelling things to the gods in order that the gods would pay more attention to us. So incense and so if you look at a burning incense, let's take a look. I was thinking of this last night. If I look at the end of a burning cigarette, I think we probably all have this if we don't have the incense one. But either incense or in the burner seat, when it burns on the end, you see the smoke arises in this very straight pattern off the end of the burn. In a very still room especially, right? The incense will go straight up. That's laminar flow, right? That's non-chaotic. Or the smoke from the cigarette will go straight, but at some point there's a little wiggle, right? At some point there's a little wiggle and the smoke and it turns into this sort of chaotic flowing up. So that's I think a really good analogy for the universe in general, that we have this little bit of chaos that was necessary for the creation of the universe. That's the thing to remember, is that without the chaos there is no matter. So there is no created universe. And if God's plan is to spread love as maximally as possible, he needs to spread it in an uncreated place where he exists, and he needs to, an uncreated place where he resides, but also in a created space where a being can be created that will freely love him back. And I've talked about this endlessly, about the intelligence, about the evolution, and about human intelligence. Growing to the point where it could freely love God back. But so this and the church, I think, recognizes that. They say that the incense, the container for the incense, is the church, and the little charcoal burning charcoal on the inside of the censer, right? So the censer outside is the church, and the burning charcoal on the inside is Jesus Christ. They call him the burning coal sometimes, but the point of ignition, the point of creation, right? So you have some sort of little quantum, perturbation in the early universe, and you get a chaotic. And so this idea that the Christ is creating this little, creating the incense that as it rises will then, through the action of the chaos, will then spread through the room, and the priest is going to take this thing around and swing it. So there's going to be no laminar flow. It's like the coal is creating the incense, and the incense, maybe is this chaotic thing is indicative of the world, right? The smoke, and so. But the thing that happens is when you smell it, is that the smell is not a chaotic event, right? The smell is this pure thing. It doesn't have any edges to it. The smell is the smell, and it is nothing else. It's not here's the smoke, here's the air, and here's the interface that's falling apart due to chaos. Your sense of smell is you smell the incense and it just is. There is no remainder, right? So that's the beautiful thing I think about aroma and taste. I think it's why my whole life I've been sort of obsessed with it, is because it feels quantum, right? It feels like a no remainder situation, a no chaos that's involved. So maybe that's the Holy Spirit. So, right, we have from before the Holy Spirit is in that trinity of blood and water, and Holy Spirit at the baptism. That the Trinity is the Spirit, is the laminar flow, is that with no perturbation, with the quantum world. So I think of and there have been studies in the sense of taste, and it appears as though you're where the actual sensing of these molecules are in your head, and you're near your brain, right? It's right next to your brain where they're sensed. They're quantum events that are going on that cause you to taste things differently. So that's sort of on the edge of, and I don't know how great those theories are, but of course I hear that theory and I'm immediately going to make the connection because that's what we do. And that's what we humans do. So so I love this. So I've always been obsessed with the censer. Like I said, it's why I went to the church for the incense, and that the censer is the church, and the inside is Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit is emanating from it in the aromas. But you also have this little flaw, or big flaw, depending on how you approach the world, of the chaos, of the negative side. And the final thought I have for today is that God's plan to create a universe that has the matter so that we can exist, so that we can become smart enough and have enough intellect, have enough knowledge, to be able to love God completely and return from his effusive love projecting towards us. The whole project of God can be seen in something as simple as the incense that you're taking around, is that there has to be chaos to produce the matter, and that the chaos needs to be there. And so the smoke rising in this non-ideal pattern up towards God, and you're thinking, well, that's not ideal. It would be better if there were no chaos. It'd be better. But if there's no chaos, there's no universe. And if there's no universe, there's no completion of God's plan of love. So that's how I'm thinking of it. It's kind of a little all over the map here today. It's Christmas Eve, and I'm about to go do some Old Testament readings at the church, so I got that on my mind a little bit. But that's some food for thought on a Christmas Eve. Thanks.